Hey, all. Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today's collectors prize battle letters written by soldiers and other participants from the Civil War period. The best of these letters are filled with vivid descriptions of combat and other anecdotes that reveal the triumph and tragedy of a fight. The Battle of Charleston, so less remembered battle fought in Western Virginia on September 13th, 1862, was described by a soldier using the pen name 44th. As you'll come to find out, that's the 44th Ohio Infantry. I haven't seen the original of this battle letter because partly the reason we found it, it was published in a newspaper, an Ohio newspaper, the Troy Times, in its September 25th, 1862 edition, about 2 weeks after the fight. It's a long letter, and I want to share a passage with you that reveals interesting details about what it was like to be part of a battle, and in this case, on the losing side of the battle. Some of the folks that you're going to hear mentioned, one of them is the gentleman pictured here. This is a post war image of Chaplain George S. Woodhull. His life dates are 1829 to 1912. He served in 1862 what was known as the 4th Virginia Infantry. A year later, it would be known as the 4th West Virginia Infantry. There's an anecdote about him which is really powerful, and I want you to hear it. Some other folks that are mentioned in this letter is Colonel Joseph Andrew Jackson Lightburn. He's the commander of the 4th Virginia or 4th West Virginia Infantry, commanded about 5,000 troops that day, and he went up against 5,000 Confederates in almost even number, commanded by Confederate General William W. Loring. This battle, in fact, was part of Loring's successful Kanawha Valley campaign, which ultimately was successful in driving U.S. forces out of the valley. One other name you'll hear mentioned is a soldier named McGrew, and I've done a little bit of research and found out that he's Napoleon B. McGrew, served in the 34th Ohio Infantry. He was severely wounded, as you'll hear about, and survived an amputation of his leg. So let me get to this passage written by someone, again, simply known by the pen name 44th, talking about reporting the Battle of Charleston. By 10 o'clock Saturday, September 13th, our whole train had passed through the city and crossed the Elk River in safety. The sick and wounded started down the river in boats, and our forces were in position to give battle on the west side of the Elk River. The 47th Ohio was sent out on the Gully Road beyond the eastern limits of the town at about 11 a.m. and began to skirmish with the advance of the enemy. Regiment after regiment came pouring down upon them, but the gallant 47th boldly fulfilled its mission. The rebels were held at bay until everything beyond the Elk was in readiness for their reception, when our boys fell slowly through the town, crossed the bridge, tearing up the planks amidst a storm of bullets. And as the rebels came up the approach to the bridge, pushing in heavy columns, our little battery hurled among them a tempest of grape and canister that sent them flying in every direction. The wires of the fine suspension bridge were cut, and the beautiful structure fell with a crash into the Elk River. The 44th Ohio and 4th Virginia formed in line of battle in the open fields, and while the band played Yankee Doodle, took possession on a small eminence protected by woods, and there they remained the whole day under a terrible cannonading from the opposite bank of the Kanawha. The rebels opened battery after battery upon us, but our boys answered them shot for shot, and about 4 o'clock the cannonading was deafening. The enemy were very bold and persevering in their attempts to cross the river, but from time to time were driven back and were fearful of slaughter. Once a large body of cavalry forded the Elk and were permitted to approach within short range of the position held by the detachment of the 44th, when the leaden hail from our Enfield rifles, was suddenly poured into them, carrying dismay and death into their ranks. They scattered, reeled, and fell dead and dying, the remnant dashing through the river back to their own lines. The casualties on our side were few. 15 will probably cover our entire loss at the Battle of Charleston. By 4:30 the train was out of the road where it had been crowding all day, and about 5, the Ninth Virginia, to Ninth West Virginia later on, passed down the road, having been called out of action. At 6 p.m., the musketry had entirely ceased on both sides, but the cannonading grew fiercer and evidently more effective from our guns as the enemy were continually shifting their positions. The city, Charleston, was on fire. Dense volumes of black smoke were rolling over the town, the tongues of flame flashing through the blackness and writhing around the church spires, darting greedily at everything combustible that came in its way. But few cases were brought into the hospital. The first was a young man through the 34th, that's the 34th Ohio, shot by a cannonball through the knee. His leg was amputated close to the body. His name is McGrew, and he is from Walnut Hills. The enemy, believing they had anticipated our intention to retreat down the river road, had planted cannon and placed some of their superabundant regiments to intercept us. But Colonel Lightburn had no idea of furthering the convenient arrangements, and our train and forces turned off at the road leading across the country from the Kanawha to the Ohio at Ravenswood. About an hour before dark, a man from Company C, 44th Regiment, was brought in terribly wounded by a bursting shell. The surgeons were just preparing to leave, and we were all ordered to follow, as nothing could be done for the poor fellow. He was cut almost in two, the shell striking his hip. He was conscious and begged hard for us not to leave him to die alone. The chaplain of the 4th Virginia and myself, by the way, that's Woodhull, the chaplain of the 4th Virginia and myself were the only ones left, and we decided to remain as long as we dared. The regiments passed down the road until all were gone, save the 4th Virginia and the 44th Ohio. The shadows of approaching night were darkening the valleys, and the lurid glare from the burning city, the vivid flashing from the guns as they momentarily lit the deepening gloom, added a strange interest to the mournful task we had imposed upon ourselves. The hills were echoing and re-echoing the thunders of the iron guns, and yet it seemed to me that the stillness of death reigned in the little cottage. The chaplain bent over our comrade, whispering words of cheer from the word of truth, and the dying man clasped his hands in his agony and said, "My wife, my children, my blessed Redeemer," and died. We went out of the room into the open air. The peaceful stars seemed to look down in dreaming wonder upon the discordant scene. The noble man of God stood with his venerable head uncovered, his fine eye, so it seemed to me, lit with the fire of holy patriotism. This is a description of Woodhull. But the tears trickled down his cheeks as he thought, no doubt, of the mangled form lying within. Chaplain Woodhull of the 4th Virginia is the right man in the right place. We could not bury the poor man. It was all we could do to make our own retreat. So there you have the story of the Battle of Charleston. And although the writer with the pen name 44th makes it sound like it might have been a victory, and certainly these guys fought with all the confidence and all of the training they had. However, they were forced back at the end of the day by a horrific artillery barrage that caused a number of casualties. Among them, the man, his name his name not revealed. And then, of course, Chaplain Woodhull watching over this man in the final moments, tears trickling down his cheeks. And then the beautiful, eloquent description of the nighttime and the night sky. Really amazing writing and amazing description. And I can't help but think that whoever this individual named 44th was, that part of this report that he made was cathartic. It was a way for him to describe what he had witnessed and what he had seen, and to share the horrors of war as only one who has experienced it can. So thanks for listening. Thanks to Phil Spoggy, contributing editor of Military Images, for making me aware of this moving and poignant letter. Take care, and we'll see you till the next episode.